Hi, version 2.1 is here in less than 3 days, and with it comes the most stylish Gamble Goblin there is, Aventurine. He is our newest 5-star and looks to begin a new era of units who are able to fulfill multiple roles in a team. Aventurine is able to both provide sustain and provide damage, making him one of the most overloaded characters in this game. But is just having an abundance of stuff in your kit makes him worth it to pull? Well, here are 3 reasons why you should pull for Aventurine and 3 reasons why you should not pull for Aventurine. Before we start, I'll be giving away a supply pass / welcome in / crystal card to my subscribers at 4k subs, so make sure you subscribe to enter. To start, what does Aventurine do? Aventurine is a 5-star imaginary unit following the path of preservation. Aventurine's skill grants all allies a shield that can be stacked. Aventurine's talent grants effect rest to all shielded ally and gains 1 talent stack when any shielded ally gets hit. However, when Aventurine is shielded, he can resist crowd control and instead gains 2 talent stack when attacked. In addition, when you have 7 stacks of your talent, you launch a 7-hit follow-up attack with each hit being a random enemy. And lastly, Aventurine's ultimate randomly grants him 1 to 7 stacks of his talent and deals single target damage while inflicting a debuff causing the enemy to take more crit damage. Aventurine has one of the most overloaded kits featuring a shield, a follow-up attack, and a debuff, making him one of the most universal units in the game. And that brings us onto the 3 reasons why you should pull for Aventurine. Number 1. Aventurine is an incredible unit that's able to both sustain really well and output decent damage. Aventurine's shield scaling is actually only slightly behind Jeopard's, and he has it on his skill rather than on his ultimate. These 2 things combined makes Aventurine one of the best sustain units in the game despite not having his entire kit focused on it. But also due to his major traces, he also gains shields through other more SP friendly methods, making him also quite the comfy character in some cases. In addition to all that, Aventurine also has really good damage despite also being one of the best sustains. Now of course, he does not have enough damage to match main DPSs and such, but his follow-up attack and his ultimate makes him do more than enough damage to make a difference compared to if you were to use someone like Locha. In fact, if you were to fully utilize his major traits bingo by using a team full of follow-up attackers, you're actually able to consistently use Aventurine's follow-up attack and make him contribute a reasonable amount to your team's DPS. And if you also fully utilize his major traits leverage, you can also gain up to 48% crit rate, making him also quite easy to hit a good crit ratio. Number 2, while talking about sync comps, Aventurine is an insane upgrade for follow-up attack teams. One major example is this team with Dr. Ratio, Topaz, and Raw Mate. The pairing of Dr. Ratio and Topaz is already a very strong one as they complement each other perfectly, but adding Aventurine to the team will actually further increase the synergy, making this one of, if not the most synergistic teams in the game. And with Ramei or the upcoming Robin being the cherry on top, this team is truly able to bring out the best out of everyone and become one of the strongest single target teams. But for those that are not interested in his follow-up attacks, Aventurine becomes the prime upgrade to Akron teams due to his debuff on his ultimate and his signature light cone. This actually makes him the best sustain unit for Akron, since after all, he is a preservation unit, so even if you don't have his light cone, the trend light cone will also do wonders. And of course, at the end of the day, Aventurine is just a genuinely good sustain, so anyway, when you need a sustain, he'll be a great option. Number 3. Aventurine will most likely become the premier sustain option for fast clearing content like MLC and Pure Fiction, especially for higher investment players. The reason is plain and simple. While other sustains able to, well, sustain, but at most also give you a small buff or energy etc, Aventurine's personal damage in addition to his debuffs will actually lead to more total team damage in most cases. So for players who are not high enough investment to not run a sustain and not low enough investment to worry about using a good sustain, which is actually a good amount of the player base, Aventurine will improve your MLC and Pure Fiction clears to a good amount due to him being able to sustain enough to comfortably not worry about your team dying, and while also dishing out good personal damage so you don't feel bad about running a sustain over a buffer or DPS. This is actually really nice to hear, especially talking about pull value, as he is a direct upgrade for most players even over limited 5-star units like Locha, Fushan and such. However, with all that said and done, not everything is perfect for him, especially for people who already have limited 5-star sustains and or can already clear MLC and Pure Fiction comfortably. Aventurine may not be looking too hot of a pull. So that brings us on to the 3 reasons why you should not pull for Aventurine. Number 1, the reality for Aventurine is this. At the end of the day, he is a very niche unit compared to other sustain units. Now of course, as I said before, you could always just use him as a generic sustain unit and it will all be fine. But if you want to use everything in his kit to his max potential, he becomes a rather niche unit. Because no matter how strong his sustaining capabilities are, there's no doubt he traded some of his power to a lot more power on his damage. This is just simple and good game design, as otherwise Aventurine would just be so broken and there will be no reason to pull for anyone else. Well, Acheron exists, but I digress. Anyways, back on topic, this all makes it so Aventurine is actually not that big of an upgrade for most players. In fact, the upgrade is actually so small, it makes him kinda pointless to pull, as you end up probably wasting your already built sustain units and Jades for a small upgrade, and that is just not worth it. Number 2. There's a term I like to describe characters that don't specialize in something but rather do a lot in many things, called Jack of all trades. And Aventurine is truly the prime example, being a character that has sustain, damage, and debuffs. Now, while being a Jack of all trades means you have a lot going for you, it also means you're really the best at anything. Outside of fold-up attack teams and being Acheron support, most of the time, he is really not any better than the current best sustains. Because if you actually need to sustain, either because the enemy hurts or you can't zero cycle, you would rather play Lotra or Full Shrun. Or for those that can zero cycle, then you would rather just run a buffer or a debuffer instead of Aventurine, as you don't even need a sustain. Aventurine is kind of just stuck in the middle ground, where you are strong enough to low cycle, but not strong enough to zero cycle, which, as I said before, is a good amount of players. But the unfortunate part is that you will unfortunately escape this eventually if you keep playing. And when that time comes, Aventurine does unfortunately become obsolete. Number 3. Just like Acheron, a lot of Aventurine's potential is locked behind his light cone. While it's not as bad as Acheron, there's no denying that Aventurine's signature light cone significantly increases the power of Aventurine, whether it be his shielding, damage, or buffing/debuffing. This is actually a very annoying point, as while other sustain units don't necessarily require their signature to show their max potential, Aventurine almost needs his to feel complete. Now, I'm not saying that he has no free-to-play options, since he does scale off defense, which is what the majority of Preservation light cones help with, and in fact, Japar's light cone is actually pretty close to his signature in actual gameplay. It is just still unfortunate to see the true power of a sustained DPS locked behind another gacha wall. While talking about his light cone, there's actually another spot point I want to mention, and that is his major trace leverage. This trace wants you to have 4000 defense, and you should always try to get this, as it gives you a whopping 48% crit rate. This is something that you really don't want to miss out on, but without a light cone giving you defense, reaching that 4k defense without sacrificing speed boots does get a bit cringe. So yeah, as always, waifus and husbanders are always over meta. I will pull for him just because he's strippy as hell and that's all I care about. But before I end, there's one thing I want to clarify. The whole problem with Aventurine in different investment accounts. In short, I like to divide investment levels into 3 categories. Low investments, which are casual/lore only players up to free to play, medium investment, which could be free to play but grinds every event or dolphins, and high investments, which are just whales. Ultimately, Aventurine is really only super good for medium investments, as low investments actually need a proper sustain and high investment doesn't need sustain at all. But don't get me wrong, medium investment is a good amount of us, so Aventurine will overall be a very good unit for most of us. Well, in hindsight this should have been said earlier, but